Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And once again, Derek has abandoned us. He is not with us today, but that's a great opportunity for me to introduce our co-host, our guest co-host, Ariana Guajardo, who is on our comms team here, but she's also the host of her own podcast. So one of my favorite things is to shamelessly plug, of course, all of our other products. And she's the co-host of her own podcast, Sweet Tea. So what's the tea? What's the sweet tea around the Capitol this week?
Well, first of all, I love a shameless plug. That shows that you're doing a good job on YouTube. So thank you. Yeah, everyone needs to check out the Sweet Tea series. What's happening at the Capitol,
or in and around Austin, because it's like culture, politics.
Well, I think the Sweet Tea, I need to bring in the stuff happening in culture, which is over the last 2 weeks there were 2 movie re-releases. One of them actually broke records as being like the top-grossing re-release film. That was Star Wars Episode 3, and the other one was Pride and Prejudice, and I was definitely at both of those.
I was going to say, is that just sort of a cross-section? Is that the Venn diagram of where you are entertainment-wise?
I don't know if everyone exists within that kind of cross-section, but I definitely noticed which of my friends were liking posts on Instagram and who there was some overlap with. So.
Well, this is already starting well. I'm already learning new things from millennials. Let's jump into, of course, we do a hot take at the very beginning, and I was conflicted on the hot take that I wanted. We'll have to wait another week to find out Derek's hot take on gorilla versus man. But if you're interested in jumping in on that debate, of course, the social media exploded this week. Some viral content of somebody asking the question, who would win between a gorilla versus 100 men? Do you have a hot take on that?
Well, I know there's a lot of downsides that people think about with social media, but I don't know what I would do without these internet controversies.
Sit around. I had nothing to think about. What's going on social media?
So, I think we already know the answer, which is it only takes one boy, and we saw what happened with Harambe. So there's the hot take.
Harambe. Ouch. Oh, man. Now, is this, because I've seen the movie King Kong 1,000 times. That was in my childhood. That was one of the monster movies that we watched.
I think you're dating yourself now, Brian.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, and there's probably been 13 different remakes since the one that I watched with Jessica Lange. But it definitely took a lot more than 100 men, to get him off the skyscraper. All right. So I have just a lot of questions because I wasn't, obviously this stuff passes by and I don't catch it until the very end when everybody's made up their mind. So you're taking the 100 men over the gorilla.
Yeah. Sometimes, you got to root for your own team. So
I got to know the strategy. I have so many questions. I have so many questions about how is it just you bum rush the gorilla all at once, or can you, do you throw stuff at it and make it run around and get tired? How do you?
Well, see, that's where it brings up question of do you have access to weapons? And if you don't have access to weapons, do you have access to food? Mm-hmm. So,
maybe you befriend the gorilla, and then once it accepts you into its gorilla world, then you undermine it and you murder it.
Would that be your strategy?
I don't know. I'm just curious what the parameters are here.
I think it would just be so overstimulating to have 100 men surrounding a gorilla that it would maybe freak out, and then you could sneak attack,
run away, and run up a tree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had and for those of you at home, that was Nikki Pressley, who's our.
Sorry, I had to jump in there.
Who's our guest here? She's the chief of staff for Right on Crime, which is of course our criminal justice initiative here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. She's also the Texas Policy Director for ROC as well. So she's working on all things criminal justice related here in Texas. So hot take is gorilla or man?
I believe man.
Okay.
Yes. And I will do a shameless plug for Sweet Tea also, because if you're sick of listening to policy discussions, we talked about the Kardashians on my Sweet Tea episode.
I'll have to figure out what that's all about.
It's a great one.
And Right on Crime is a podcast as well.
Yes, we do. The Right on Crime podcast. And we interview lots of people who are in our field, sometimes representatives, senators from across the nation, and it's very interesting. And they're short and sweet, so easy listens.
Excellent. So on your commute, unless you're in Austin, you'll probably listen to 2 or 3 episodes. On your commute home, you can listen to it. So jumping ahead a little bit to our polling, because we like to talk about the polling, I had a second hot take, and I'll be curious your opinion on this. According to the new Texas Lyceum poll, 65% of Texans say that America would be better if it were more like Texas. So if there's one thing that you could export that is quintessentially Texan to the rest of the country to make it better, what would it be? Ari, we'll start with you.
The answer is clearly barbecue.
Barbecue.
Because if I'm traveling, I still have access to good barbecue. And I'm sorry, South Carolina, you can't keep calling that barbecue.
I was going to say North Carolina, South Carolina, and Kansas City would probably be like, hey, we have a little bit of barbecue.
Yeah, and I'm going to
here.
say, yeah, that's cute.
For me, I think it's awesome to say y'all. And I just like saying it. And I think it's funny when I leave Texas and I say y'all and they look at me like I'm, like I'm in a zoo. And they're like, oh, he said it. He said the thing. They said the thing they say in Texas. He said it. And so I would just wish more people would say it because it's appropriate in so many different contexts. Sometimes it's singular, sometimes it's plural, sometimes it means what it doesn't mean. So I would bring it to the rest of the country to be able to say y'all. Nikki, do you have a favorite Texas thing you would export?
I appreciate everyone's manners, like the
Wow.
Southern hospitality,
There you go.
like the sweetness of everyone. I mean, not everyone, but the majority. I think the culture is just everyone's very inviting in Texas. Sometimes I travel and I'm like, what is happening here? Like, why is everyone mad at me? Like,
I was in New York like 2 weeks ago, and there was like a problem like with our hotel and stuff, and the guy was behind the desk was just mean, and I was like, I just want to go home to nicer people.
There is a dark side to Southern hospitality, which it's very passive aggressive. That it can feel like Southern hospitality
That's true.
when in fact they're like insulting you, far beyond anything you could understand. So.
It sharpens the mind though to be able to be able to distinguish between those.
All right. Well, that's your double hot take for this episode of The Right Idea. So we will get into the ideas. I've already introduced Nikki Pressley. She's the chief of staff at Right on Crime. Let's get into this issue. This is it's a big issue that is happening just in the last couple of not the last couple of weeks, but it's becoming more and more on the front page the last couple of weeks because some bills are starting to move through the legislature or already have been moving through the legislature, and then perhaps more importantly, the governor has now, since the school choice debate is over and he's signing the bill on Saturday, he has really taken up bail reform as one of his top issues. It was an emergency item, Nikki, that he mentioned during the beginning of the year. Take us through a little bit of the issue of what is it about? Honestly, I probably want to set this up with some current events that have happened recently, so people can kind of understand where we're coming from. Of course, there was the tragic incident that happened in Frisco where there was an altercation and one of the boys, stabbed one of the other boys, out of nowhere, unprovoked. Or we won't get into the details of the case there, but at any rate, there was outrage because it was a very violent, tragic attack. There was $1 million bail set, and then the judge in the case, reduced that bail to $250,000 instead of $1 million. This is the kind of thing that happens over and over again, where we see people committing acts of violence, heinous acts of violence, that threaten public safety, and then we have judges come in and say, no, we're going to reduce the bail so that you can get out, and then a lot of people are concerned that that's a big public policy issue, and that's happened in a number of it's almost like every week it feels like we're seeing some new example of that. So maybe. In the context of those current events, can you set the stage kind of where we are in terms of the legislative debate on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll also maybe to jump back to provide a little bit of context and history. We've been working on this bail constitutional amendment for probably almost a decade now. Over the past 3 sessions, I've been working on it. And in 2021, we almost got it passed, but we did get the Damon Allen Act passed, which provided a lot more information to judges. They actually have to review criminal history record information now, and that just better informs their decision making. But they still are restricted by our current constitution, and they can't deny bail for anyone except for capital murder. And then if you have multiple felony convictions, and then a few domestic violence, family violence situations. So it's very, very narrow, especially when compared to other states.
So just to clarify, I mean, there's a whole list of incredibly heinous crimes that you could be credibly accused of and arrested for, and yet under our Constitution, judges would be compelled to offer you bail that you could then pay, or a portion of which you could pay, and get out and be free on the street.
Yes, and so like I said, capital murder you can deny, but just regular murder you cannot. And then you have obviously things like sexual assault and trafficking and very heinous crimes that we've deemed like the most heinous in our code and
involving children or
as a
something of that
society.
nature.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of like what you mentioned with that case from Frisco, obviously a very tragic incident. So that judge didn't have the option to deny bond. So they originally set it, I think it was $1 million, maybe $1.2 million, and then reduced because you have to reduce for ability to pay measures. And the crazy thing is once it's reduced to $250,000, you only have to put maybe 10% down to a bondsman, and then they kind of assume the liability. So really that $250,000 was more probably like $25,000, if that, to a bondsman. So it's the judge's hands are tied in that situation. They have to set a bond. Like they cannot deny.
I don't want to skip over a really important second point that you made, which is, the first point is only in extreme circumstances or very limited, narrow circumstances can they even deny bond. So they have to. That's the first point, is that they have to allow for bail. But then the second point is, it can't be so extreme. It can't be $10 million or something. It has to be within that individual's ability to pay, which also seems kind of crazy in certain contexts, like where someone's murdered someone.
Right.
And so if you're poor, and I don't know anything about this, so we'll just ignore this case for now. But if you're a poor person who murders someone else, you could potentially get a $100,000 bond because that would be your ability to pay.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole issue with our current system right now, because it is very heavily money-based, right? Whereas right on crime and TPPF, we've always advocated for it to be more of a risk-based system, right? So if someone's low risk, we don't think that they should be held pre-trial, and if they can be safely released to their community on a personal bond, like let's say it's a first-time nonviolent misdemeanor, then I think that they should be able to do that. But in these high-risk cases, and if we're relying on money like that, as we just saw, it's not actually helping the community and keeping us safe. It's just, can you pay this, yes or no? And that's kind of the question, rather than do we detain this person because we're scared of them.
Ari, what do you make of it? I mean, neither one of us are criminal justice experts by any means, but this just, when I see this kind of thing, and I see, there was somebody, just this week who was the guy who crashed and killed 5 people on I-35, recklessly killed people. There was a $1.2 million bond that was initially set for him, and it got reduced to $7,000. Now, there might be some mitigating circumstances there, and I won't get into the details of that, but you see those headlines. It's like, what is the $1.2 million, and then the bond goes down to $7,000? That's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm coming from, this is obviously not as someone who's like an ROC expert or right on crime expert by any means, but my lens that I'm viewing this through is just like, younger woman living in Austin, Texas, which already, safety is kind of a concern, even just walking from a parking garage into the office on a daily basis. Right. So for me, it just feels a little bit threatening that our criminal justice system isn't equipped properly to be able to handle situations of justice pre-trial.
Yeah. And that's a good, I mean, we've you've already articulated, look, the judge's hands are tied in these cases. They have to give, they have to set bail, and they have to make it within someone's ability to pay. I just can't. I mean, are there others? I mean, is Texas the only one who does it like that? That sounds.
We definitely do have some of the loosest, I would say, bail laws, right? Our Constitution says all prisoners shall be bailable. And then we have a small list of things that you can be held pre-trial for. Whereas even states like California, New York, New Jersey have way more offenses that you can be denied bail for. And so it's pretty crazy to me that these very liberal states have more options for judges to keep someone pretrial.
How did it get like this? I mean, I want to get to the solutions and things like that, but you would think in a place like Texas where we have the death penalty and everybody gets to carry a gun, and we're all about public safety and the consequences of people who commit crimes, and very public safety minded, that we would have that this would be a real issue here in Texas.
I think there's a couple things, right? So I think when the Constitution was written, it wasn't taking us years for somebody to go to trial, right? It was taking maybe a couple months. And so maybe there was less risk with releasing some of these people because they're not going to be out for years and years. And when you don't have swiftness and certainty, someone is more likely to reoffend because they're not being held accountable. So the wait time and the backlog, I think, contributes a lot to what we're seeing. But it's also just extremely difficult to pass a constitutional amendment, and that's what we need. And you need 100 votes. And as we all know, we only have 88 Republicans in the House, so you need Democrats. And the number of Democrats that we need gets smaller each time, it feels. But it doesn't change the fact that we do need some bipartisanship in the House. In the Senate, actually, there's only been one no vote, and so it's overwhelmingly supported in the Senate, but unfortunately the House, we are having a lot of difficulties coming to an agreement.
And that's a little frustrating because this kind of thing, I mean, nothing that we've talked about today, nothing that I've said, cuts along Republican versus Democrat lines or conservative versus liberal principles. Like, I mean, there are certainly, I mean, as you articulated a little already, nobody has an interest in locking people up who are low risk or no risk and letting them suffer and wail away in prison for years. If they've got, some kind of traffic ticket. I mean, I'm just, being facetious, of course, but like if it's something that's very low in terms of public safety. So it's a little frustrating that it feels like it breaks along, that this kind of thing would continue to break along sort of Republican versus Democrat lines, and that you couldn't get to a bipartisan, which you get more than 100 votes, hopefully.
Yeah. And I mean, we just did polling showing that 81% of Texans want this to go to the ballot so that they can vote for it. And that included, I think, 70% of Democrats said that they want a constitutional amendment for judges to deny bail, because this is, like you said, it's not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is a statewide issue. Everyone cares about feeling safe. And when people don't feel safe, we need to do something about that. And I think that this is definitely a solution to keep our community safer and stop seeing victims like over and over again. I see, like you said, stories every week of somebody who's a repeat offender out on bond and either murders someone, it has an aggravated assault charge. I mean, I'm sick of seeing all these victims. It's really rough.
And then, so let's talk about the solution. Is it really just that simple? Like, what is the nature of because I guess it's, for the people, it's HJR5, is that right?
It's SJR5.
SJR5.
Yes,
okay.
SJR5. And then there is a House companion, HJR15. I think probably the Senate bill will move because it's already passed the Senate. But that is one solution, right? I think.
What is I mean, is it that simple? It just says judges have the ability?
Yeah, so it's expanding what they can deny for if there's clear and convincing evidence that they may not show up in court or they can't keep the community safe with pretrial release conditions. And it expands to murder, sexual assault of a child, continuous trafficking of persons, just a few violent and sexual offenses. And this is a may, it's not a shall. So the governor has been actually pointing out kind of rogue judges that we have in the state that are releasing people that they could detain. However, I think even with this constitutional amendment being permissive, I think we're going to be able to see which judges are making the wrong decisions, and then they can be held accountable by the voters, rather than being like, oh, well, we don't have the option, our hands are tied type of situation. So I do think that it will definitely help. And then also there are a few other bail bills going through, like Senate Bill 9 from Senator Huffman. In that bill, which this goes to kind of the manslaughter case that you were talking about in Travis County, there is an option in there for prosecutors to appeal a bond decision for felony cases, which we can get into like the nitty gritty specifics of like what felony cases they should be able to appeal for. But overall, that's a case where you may not be able to deny bond in that case, even with the constitutional amendment. But if SB 9 were to pass, then a prosecutor could appeal that bond decision and then hold someone pretrial while that appeal is going through.
I'm just curious about the right to bail. I mean, that's not, I mean, I've taken a couple con law classes and, I understand what the Constitution says about your right to, to defend yourself in court and, Fifth Amendment and those kinds of things. But I've never heard of the right to bail. Like, I mean, where is that derived from? Is that just a Texas thing or?
Yeah, our Texas Constitution says that.
Right. But I mean, where does that even come from? Like, I've never even heard of that as a thing.
Philosophical concept.
Yeah.
I haven't heard our lawyers upstance talking about it, for example.
Yeah. Right. Like you have this, like, you're born into this world, right to free speech and bail, like you literally never talk about it.
I think the presumption of release, dates back hundreds of years, basically. But the Supreme Court has ruled that if if you are a threat to your community and there are no conditions that could reasonably ensure that the community is held or community is kept safe, and you will show up in court, then you can be denied bond. Because I think a lot of times the opposition will say, like, this is unconstitutional to hold people pre-trial, it's eliminating due process rights, and that's just not true. You still get to go through the full process and go to a jury of your peers and have all of your due process rights play out. But if you are a clear and convincing threat to your community, you are not, like, just granted the right to pre-trial release.
Right. Yeah. I'm always ganged up on the show but from policy people, because I usually have Derek and a policy person here. So it's nice to have a communications expert here with me.
Yeah, you feel outnumbered yet, Nikki?
Yeah. but I never get to ask about these questions or at least talk about it. I mean, this would seem, the governor has been getting, especially since school choice passed, has getting really active on this, Ari, and, been putting out a lot on social media. He's done a number of events already. He's in Houston today with the Democratic mayor of the city of Houston doing a roundtable, and then they're going to do a press conference here, and they're probably right around now, actually. And so from a communication standpoint, is this just like a set them up, knock them down kind of thing? Like this is about public safety, or do you think there's more of a nuanced message here that they're going to have to convince the people on this issue?
It seems like, and especially like in light of what you were saying, Nikki, with the polling that we have already, it seems like just bringing the awareness and having that kind of communications messaging seems to be the right way to go, especially from the public safety issue. And I think, like, looking at the Senate, you were saying that they've only had one no vote, right? I think that also demonstrates that there is still a possibility for, like, bipartisan support here. So I guess that's the way that I see it potentially going.
You did mention the poll. It was 81% of Texans agree with the approach from SJR. Is it SJR? Is that right?
SJR 5,
SJR 5.
yes.
Yeah, agree with that approach. But 73% of Democrats, and I forget what the independents are. It's probably around the same, 75% of independents. I'm just wondering what the other side sees. Is there a victim or the rights of the accused or something here that is sort of that is more of a compelling issue for people? I'm just not sure what the other side would other than maybe the bail bondsmen who have a financial interest in making sure that everybody can get bail, which is fair. That's a totally fair thing on their point. However, it may affect public safety. But is there more of a moral argument maybe on the other side that we're not considering?
I think that they're concerned with kind of what I mentioned before, like the elimination or chipping away at due process rights. But this is not, we are not unique in trying to do this. Like I said, like we have very liberal states in this country that have much more robust preventative detention models. And everything is going just fine. The world is not ending. I think they're probably a little bit safer with those models. But I think just generally they're concerned about people being held pretrial without having their due process rights play out. And particularly innocent people, which I am concerned about that as well. But this is, like I said, cases where there's clear and convincing evidence, right? Like this is not just a preponderance of the evidence. This is a pretty high standard for judges to meet in order to detain someone.
Eyewitnesses, all kinds of stuff like that.
And I'm also glad that you pointed out the difference between a may and a shall, because it gives that kind of discretion to judges, right?
Yes, for sure.
Texas has a really good reputation for being a leader on criminal justice reform, and a little bit of a victory lap there for Right on Crime, which has been around for over a decade and been a real leader in terms of pushing a specific, maybe a Texas brand of criminal justice reform, including the First Step Act, which of course was Trump's the first administration's probably landmark reform of his entire administration, was kind of birthed here in Texas and with Right on Crime. What other big issues, whether it be at the state level, kind of what's our report card now in Texas? I mean, this seems like a very serious issue that we need to be hitting, but in terms of the overall approach to criminal justice in Texas, what's your assessment of kind of our report card here in Texas? And are there other national issues that maybe Texas could lead on in this, now that we have another friendly administration up there, that Texas could be leading on at the national level?
Yeah, I will say we have really great recidivism rates in this state. It's probably one of the lowest in the country, around 20% for people exiting incarceration, which is amazing. I am so proud of all the work that people did before me to get to this point. And that was just through investing in diversion and doing more specialized and individualized sentencing for people. I will say I feel like we're falling behind whenever it comes to bail. For example, Ohio has been reaching out to us. They want to model bail after what we're trying to do in Texas. And I'm like, you guys might get it done before us. I mean, at this rate.
But anyway, enough about school choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it stings when the other states get there first.
Oh, man. Get that monkey off our back. But that's great to hear.
But yeah, at the federal level, I think that there's honestly a lot of opportunity for us to do some expungement work, some clean slate work. I know that there's a lot of interest in that, and potentially even restoring rights. Like we see President Trump now has a criminal record, and so what rights could he get restored? Because in Florida, I don't think he's allowed to vote anymore.
Can he just pardon himself, just like he did for
Well, he probably can pardon himself. Maybe he'll do that.
We'll have the lawyers come down and explain that one. But what about juvenile justice too? That's also another big, interest and focus of Right on Crime. And how are we doing on that? Because I know, me just personally looking at working on some of the issues, rehabilitation or whatever we're calling that, where it basically says, look, let's not just condemn these 16, 17-year-olds, and no matter how bad the crimes are, let's not condemn them to the system and make them, felons for the rest of their life, or where they can't get a job and those kinds of things. Yeah. What kinds of, particularly in regards to juvenile justice, are there more creative and innovative programs that we're looking at to make sure that kids can get a second chance?
Yeah, I will preface this by saying, when it comes to juvenile justice, like, the first and foremost thing is that they did something very bad. They committed a crime. A lot of times they committed violence, and so they need to be held accountable. But the number one goal with juveniles, since they have a greater capacity for change, should be rehabilitation, whereas with adults, a lot of times it's a punitive measure than rehabilitation. So ways that you can kind of have a better system, and what we're trying to do in Texas a little bit more, is having kind of a closer to home, shallower in the system model. So that would mean more diversion for youth where it's safe to do so, maybe like a first-time offender if it's like nonviolent or something.
And diversion would be like getting them back into the community, getting them back with their families, and not taking them away from those sources of authority and mentorship. And
that would be like very low level. And then you have the county facilities that are run at the county level, and that's obviously in their home community, which is still more of a shallower in the system model. And then our state-run facilities should really be reserved for just the worst of the worst, right? So like murder and sexual assaults and aggravated offenses, aggravated robbery, aggravated assault. So moving towards that model of really making sure that the people in our state system need to be there is kind of where we want to go in Texas for sure.
Are we still trying to reduce the number of prisons in Texas? I know that was a goal for a long time. Is that still an issue, or are we happy with the number of facilities we have? And I
think right now, Derek, actually, I wish he was here because he just gave me numbers.
I'm having fun. And this is way more fun without him interjecting all his knowledge.
Yeah, actually. My bad, yeah.
Ganging up on me on policy stuff.
He just had a meeting last week, and there are some numbers, I think, from CJAD that is showing that we actually are going to have to start opening more beds, just based on some projections. So we did close, I think, 11 prisons. We may need to start expanding our bed space.
All those Californians coming in. We got to put them somewhere.
It's their fault.
They may get housing.
I love being able to blame California for stuff.
No, we did have a crime spike, obviously, during COVID. I mean, that is probably the majority of what is contributing to the projections. So.
All right. Well, all those people that are randomly attacking gorillas out there, just to prove a point, we need to find a place to put them. All right. Well, thank you, Nikki, for being here and kind of educating us all on kind of the current status of bail reform. It's obviously a huge issue. It's going to get a lot more attention in the next couple of weeks, particularly as Governor Abbott goes around the state talking about it. It seems like it's going to be a major priority of his. We only have about a month left before signing down.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me.
Well, all the bill filing deadlines are done. So like, it's at this point it's in God's hands, I guess, or the speakers, one or the other.
Yeah.
So thank you if you'll stick around, we do kind of a 10-minute drill at the end. We'll talk about some other issues that are going on in the state. If you'll stick around with us, we'll have some fun.
Let's hear
some fun stuff. I see.
All right, first segment on the 10-minute drill is where we talk about polling that's around the state. I was honored to be a guest at the release of the new Texas Lyceum poll. It was on a panel with a couple of other folks. It's a big poll that's done by Texas Lyceum, which is a great organization. They put it out yesterday, and there were some interesting some poll results. I don't know if you looked at it thoroughly or if you had any interesting takeaways from the poll.
I have. So one of the things that I liked that I polled was it was just asking, I consider myself to be Texan. So you had, strongly agree, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. Mm-hmm. But then seeing how many people, like over 70% of people consider themselves to be Texan, but it looks like just under 20% say that they either somewhat or strongly disagree, like with that classification. Mm-hmm. So they're living here in Texas, don't consider themselves to be Texan. And part of me is like, well, if you've been here more than 2 years and you're not Texan yet, I feel hurt that you don't feel like proud to call yourself Texan. But it's just interesting because just yesterday I was speaking to a friend from California about the way that Californians view like people from other states. Mm-hmm. And you'll have some California elites who like look down on people who use the word y'all, which they shouldn't, as we established. It's a great word. Or that kind of prejudice around like other parts of the South or Midwest. But I think Texans look at other people and we want them to be a part of this, right? Like I view it like obviously Texas is the best, Texans are the best, but people outside of Texas I just see as potential future Texans. Yeah. So I hope that
as fast as they can.
Right. So I'm hoping that 20% is like being accounted for by people coming into Texas, and that one day they'll, buy out a pair of boots and go out country dancing. Like
and be nice to people.
Yes, exactly.
So you are a native Texan, Nikki.
Yes.
Are you a native Texan?
I am.
Oh, you are. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do y'all know a lot of people that have moved here? And would have an opinion on whether or not they consider themselves a Texan?
I feel like the majority of people that I know that have moved here are at TPPF, honestly.
And they love it.
And they're obsessed with it. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But how could you not be obsessed with it? Come on.
But what I'll encourage that 20% to do is go get yourself a pair of boots and go out to honky tonk of your choice.
I don't own a pair of boots, and I'm a native Texan. I know that. Maybe
Same. You get the exception.
Yeah, I'll be the exception. Yeah. Or own a pair
if
of jeans.
If you're born in Texas, you can classify for the boots exception, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm like, what are they doing? They're wandering around just like shaking their fists at the sky, like why am I here? I'm not a real Texan.
Unless they just don't feel incorporated yet. But I don't know. Texas, we have Buc-ee's. Mm-hmm. Like that. It's a great place.
Well, one of the things. So this doesn't go as deep as the research we have done. Research not just on kind of do people feel like they're Texan or not, but among the people who understand kind of or have a concept of what it means to be Texan. What is that? Like, what is the lens? What is how do they explain what it means to be Texan? And everybody kind of has their nuances, and there's some things that kind of we have a whole research paper on it. We'll divert people to that. We don't have to do that here. But one of the things that really jumped out was people, not to use this word assimilate, but people want to assimilate. Like they realize that it's meaningful to be Texan, that it does, in fact, regardless of where you are in all the politics, there is a culture of being Texan. And when people get here, they want to be part of that. And that's what they explain in some of the research. It's like they can't wait until they feel connected to what it means to be Texan. And one of those things is, they just see what happens in other states, like in New York or in Illinois, or, even if you're a liberal in Texas, you see what happens in Florida or something like that, and you just think, well, that crazy stuff won't happen here. Like we have a more not sophisticated is not the right word, because it's not really that, but it's just more of a we're normal. We're just normal into. I don't know. Can we use that word normal? Like still, or can we normalize normal? But
it's normalize Texas.
Yeah, you see the crazy stuff that happens and the violence that happens, or the San Francisco or New York or Chicago or whatever. And you just think that's just for other states. We're not gonna, like the BLM riots of 2020. I remember across the street from our building, people were putting up the wood over the glass and everything, and the big plyboard and all of that. And I'm just looking at that going, that's not going to happen here. Like what's happening in Portland with people running up and down the streets and breaking and destroying property and stuff, just even in Austin, where there's it's pretty left wing here, that's just not going to happen here because that's not Texan, and it kind of feels like that's the culture of like what it feels. What tell me what it means to be Texan, Nikki?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like since I'm born and bred here, it's just like I am Texan. I think like the culture is what makes it, kind of like what you said. It's like the atmosphere, the overall vibe, the barbecue, the extremely hot summers. Like,
Yes.
I think there's like
that comes from the
there's
summers.
like some camaraderie about it, right? And like I think there's a sense of Texas pride, right, that other states don't necessarily have. Like I think other states look at us like we're some crazy cult, but in the best way.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we talked about at the panel as well is, I made the point like yes, we have this sort of caricature of what it means to be Texan outside, but it really isn't hubris. I mean, once you're here, it's not hubris. It's not that, we're the best and, we're better than everybody else. It's just we're normal. It's just we just will handle problems. And that there's this is one of the things that was in the research too, is that there's just a Texan way to handle things, like whatever the issue is, if it's growing jobs or if it's fixing education or if it's, making healthcare more affordable or whatever, that we'll just, we don't, as much as we talk to our friends in other states, we'll take your idea, we'll sort of adopt it to be more of a Texan way of doing things. And I think that that's really interesting in some of the research and the polling.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next segment, which is lies, damn lies, and statistics. I think yesterday was officially the first 100 days of the
Trump
Bush
administration.
Wow,
Whoa.
the Trump,
Very different things.
Yeah.
Dating himself again.
the first 100 years, first 100 days since the second Trump administration. And I got talking about lies, damn lies, and statistics. I got these from the White House, so you can determine for yourself if these are lies, damn lies, or statistics. They claim 345,000 jobs since Trump took office. 15,000 of those, though, 15,000 not of those, but also in addition to that, 15,000 federal government jobs were cut. That's something that they're bragging about at the on their website. Gasoline prices are down 7%. This goes to this issue about inflation and whether or not Trump's doing anything about it. Wholesale egg prices, which seem to be all the rage to complain about egg prices in the last couple months, are down 50%. And then, of course, the border, which has been the number one issue for Trump. It's how he got reelected, and certainly all the issues that we've had the last 4 years under Biden. Illegal border encounters are down 95%, Ari, 95%. Illegal immigrant gotaways, the biggest threat to the public safety, are now down 99%. First 100 days, you believe these statistics? And then
I can definitely at
believe?
least speak to the border one. I have a friend who I was just hanging out with, and she works in customs, and she was just telling me it's been a total transformation in like what their work looks like right now because of the new changes. And I think that she would definitely affirm that that's at least what she's seeing.
I'm curious in what way?
In Eagle Pass,
from just like crime or just like random people walking through the streets, or like what is
right?
There's
There's less people for one thing that are trying to get across. There's she was just talking about like other parts of the border are not as I think because there was kind of a messaging from the Biden administration that the U.S. is open. You guys, there is a process where you guys can just log into an app and figure out your way in.
Yeah.
And because that's not a thing anymore, people become aware of that. So there's just less people to handle with those crossings. So
yeah, as we've talked about on the show a couple times, they changed the CBP One app to the CBP Home app.
Yeah. And the promotions
home.
for even like the self-deportation, other stuff like that. We'll see how that's going to continue working.
Nikki, thoughts on the first 100 days?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on, somebody asked me recently, like, are you not scared of what's going on with Doge? I was like, scared? I'm excited. Like, let's go. Keep it going. Like,
are you disappointed that Elon's leaving Doge?
I mean, I don't really care who's running it as long as they're like cutting our spending. Like that's all that matters to me. So, I mean, thank you, Elon, for your work, but let's keep it rolling,
Shows that he's like, a good CEO type. You set something up, you make sure that there's people in there to handle it, and you go on to the next venture.
Right.
And like any good, like any good idea, Texas grabbed onto that, and now Texas is going to have its own Doge department.
Right.
By,
I think we need to Doge like every agency. I know we have Sunset, but...
Right.
feeling like we need something more intense.
Doge it up. Doge across the board. All right. Into our last segments. We have a couple minutes left for this episode of the podcast. What to watch for, what's coming up. Ari, we'll start with you. What is in the next couple of weeks between now and the end of session? What are you looking forward to working on?
Well, I am excited for being at the governor's mansion this weekend whenever he's going to be signing the school choice bill. So for me, that is what I am looking forward to, having the ink there on the paper and being able to at least celebrate that victory and look forward to for other ones that we'll see the rest
there
of the session.
Early is what I heard. I heard because the line to get in is going to be long, so get there as early as you can. But there should be, I think there's a petting zoo for the kids. I'm bringing my daughter, so it'll be fun.
Oh, cute.
I've heard rumors of Chick-fil-A and Bluebell ice cream. So
well, there you go. There's nothing more Texan than Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Bluebell's good. So Nikki, what to watch for?
I'm sorry, but I'm looking forward to bail passing.
Yeah.
I'm
Finally.
speaking it into existence that we are going to be at a bail bill signing by the end of session. So look forward to that, everyone.
Power of positive thinking there.
And if not, I'm looking forward to our special session on bail.
Well, that's honestly something that we probably should have chatted about during your segment, which is, I'm looking at this thinking, I know that there are some Democrats standing in the way of this becoming an issue, and right now it's again the governor's trying to make it not under the radar, but there's a lot going on, and so this is one of those things that if it's not your number one issue, maybe you didn't see what happened or who's responsible for blocking it, but after session. If the governor calls a special session, everybody's going to be focused on this. I mean, this is what they're going to be talking about, just like we did with school choice 2 years ago. This will be the one issue. So there's no hiding from your opposition to a bill that is supposed to make the public safety or make the public safer.
And that most people agree with.
Yeah, and then the vast majority of people agree with. So I'm just curious, what the politics of this looks like during a special session. Are people really going to stand up there and raise their hand and say, we oppose this?
I'm not totally sure. I mean, I will say there are some Democrats who are working hard to try to figure this out and reach an agreement, right? I don't know that we'll get there. I really hope that we do. But I think that they're going to have to take a vote on this. I think that this bill is going to go to the House floor, and they are going to be taking a vote on it.
In the regular session?
I think so. If I were to make a prediction, that would be my prediction, right?
I don't do enough predictions on this show. I didn't talk to Derek about that.
That would be my prediction, that there will be a vote taken, and then we'll kind of see where everyone's at. And then I think a lot of pressure will ensue during the interim and during a special. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, y'all both stole my ideas, so I'm just going to say I'm going to keep looking forward to those things as well. Let me think. I don't know if there's anything in sports we need to watch out for. I see if the Astros can make a comeback after losing all their stars. That's about it.
What happens with Bill Belichick? Had to throw that in there real quick.
Yeah, there's a debate over the over/under on when he breaks up with his girlfriend. And she becoming more of a embarrassment for him. Anyway. That'll be on the next show when Derek and I talk about Bill Belichick's love life. But Nikki, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for all this and highlighting this issue for us. It's a very big deal. Obviously, public safety is huge. And we'll see what happens with the governor between now and sine die. And we'll come back and we'll revisit your prediction on that.
It'll be a celebration next time I'm on.
It'll be a celebration. Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Ari, thank you so much for helping to guest host.
Thank you for having me. I hope you guys check out the Sweet Tea series, and I'm also on the podcast called The Hard Country with Joshua Trevino.
All right, The Hard Country, Sweet Tea. We've got the Right on Cry podcast, and of course, my favorite part, which is to shamelessly plug our newsletter, the Post, which comes out every Thursday. If you're not signed up, go ahead and do that at texaspolicy.com/thepost. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as we always like to say at the end of the show, in the immortal words of the Sam Houston, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.